Alright, guys, welcome back to the Literally Nothing But Everything podcast with your host, the one and only Mike Rispoli. That's me. So I want to start off this episode by apologizing that this episode is coming out a little bit later than normal. And I actually did have an episode that I put out, but after thinking about it, I ended up deleting it. And I want to say that it was actually out for the better part of 8 hours. I try to put these things out early in the morning so that way if people want to listen to them in the morning, they can. And after I was re-listening to it, I realized that it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to put up. So it was out there. I'm pretty sure somebody out there has it. You could probably go and listen to it. But for right now, we're just going to consider that one the long lost episode. But the reason why I took it down is because it just wasn't necessarily something that I really wanted to showcase. It was pretty much just me just going kind of ape shit on my job. And it just wasn't right. I mean, look, I am unhappy with the way that things are going. I mean, considering that the job market really isn't that great right now, all these companies are saying that they're urgently hiring, but they're all being super selective with who they're hiring. So the job market just doesn't seem to be favoring candidates. And the other issue is that unemployment rate is so low that there's really not a lot of mobility for candidates to move around. So job hunting in general has just been really difficult. So in my situation where my job is pushing me from 40 hours a week back down to 20 hours a week, I just decided that I was just going to put all of my frustrations out there and just bitch, moan, and complain. And you could be like, oh, well, what's so bad about complaining about your managers? Well, it just wasn't the right thing to do, to be honest. I mean, who hasn't talked shit about their managers in the past? I guarantee that you guys all talk to your friends and bitch about what's going on at work. But in a public setting like this, it really, I don't think, is the right way to go about things. And it also would probably affect my future employment anyways. So I'm going to be honest and say, yeah, I fucked up. It wasn't something that I should have put out. It wasn't right. But at the same point, I feel like anybody would be justified in how I felt. I mean, there are things that go wrong with my job, and my managers do drive me fucking crazy. But I didn't think that it was the right thing to do, because even though things at my job aren't necessarily perfect, I'm not perfect either. There are a lot of days where I just kind of just go through the motions and I just get the necessities done rather than doing the actual things that I have on my plate because I just procrastinated or it can just get moved. But also, I mean, my managers don't seem to be very communicative with me. And I mean, honest to God, you can look at my text messages between me and one of my bosses, and it literally looks like we're messaging on a dating app, because when I'm texting her, you can see that I'm not getting responses. So at the same point, my argument is, well, if she's not going to get back to me, then what's the point in me trying to work? Plus, part of my job is being a project manager and working through all of the stuff that we have going on. So how can I project manage if I'm not getting anything back in return on a communication level? So yeah, I fucked up in the sense of talking all the shit on a public forum, and I'll admit that. I'll be honest here. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is me just trying to be honest and open. But at the same point, I'm also not necessarily going to apologize for what I said, because it is the fact and the matter of what's going on and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Besides the fact of going from 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week, there are so many little nuances that just go on in work. But you know what? We all have that. And there's no point in me just publicly portraying all of that bullshit out into the open to try and make my managers inadvertently look bad. And at the end of the day, like I already said, it only makes me look bad too. Because here I am talking all this shit for what? Nothing's going to happen. And at the same point, though, it's not like I haven't brought some of my complaints to my managers, so it's not like they're unaware. But the rest of the world doesn't need to necessarily know a lot of this shit. I mean, as I've kind of stated, I might have stated this in the past, I have no idea. But life is kind of like a game, right? Life is a board game. You're just kind of learning it as you go along, right? And I took this as a learning opportunity for myself. And you know what? Like, God forbid this somehow makes it to the ethers of the world where everybody could see it. It wasn't a good look for me either. Because God forbid a future employer heard this. But you know what? Here's a fucking question. Honestly, why the fuck are employers so hellbent on not wanting to hire employees that complain about past managers? Like, I understand nobody wants to be labeled as being difficult to work with, but I don't necessarily see the issue there. Because if I'm an employer, I would want to know all of the reasons as to why somebody left. Like, if I was an employer, I think I would actually want to know the reasons as to what happened in management at the previous place, because I would want to know all of the reasons as to why somebody's leaving. Like, I would want to know just so this way I don't also make the same mistake as to why that person left. Like, if I'm interviewing somebody, don't just tell me that you want to learn and grow new skills. I want to know the actual reasons as to why you're leaving. You know what I mean? Like, give me the nitty gritty as to like what's going to help you moving forward. So I think it's a matter of knowing if like I might have the same management style and I want to know if you're going to be the right fit for working underneath me or like whatever it is. What were the honest to God reasons as to what made you want to leave your company? I don't know, maybe this is an overestimate, but maybe 60%, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. I'm just going to ballpark it and say 60% of employees, they leave because they're unhappy. And it's so wild to me how employers are so pissed because millennials or even like younger generations tend to job hop. But the reason why we job hop is because we're not being like validated in the work that we're doing. Or honestly, a lot of the reason is because we just don't get paid enough. I mean, I've actually been going on interviews. I actually have a couple interviews scheduled because I need a job. Like 20 hours a week is not going to help me cut my bills because even though I'm working 20 hours a week, they also cut my salary in half. And that's not going to help me out in the long run at all here. So I've been going on job interviews and I've actually been looking at jobs up in Rhode Island because I wouldn't mind wanting to maybe move back there. I loved it up there. If it wasn't for the pandemic, I never would have even come back to Greenwich. But so I'm looking for jobs up there and I'm also looking at what they're paying, and based on the jobs that I'm interviewing with and seeing what their pay ranges are, I'm also looking at what apartments are costing and I'm doing the math and I'm just like, yo, like, do employers not know what the renters market is? Like, it is absolutely crazy how expensive rents are. And then they wonder why we job hop, because when you job hop you're automatically guaranteed a higher salary. So like no wonder people are leaving. It's not necessarily a matter of they're unhappy, we're just not getting paid with what's going on in the actual markets here. Like, yeah, you can argue that inflation has been down as of recent, but that doesn't account for the other living expenses that we all have, including a fucking roof over our heads. So yeah, just to kind of help broaden my job search, I'm looking at jobs back up in Rhode Island and I wouldn't mind moving back there. And it's funny because today was my first day that I actually started like my 20 hours. I mean, it actually started on Friday, but my schedule is 9 to 2 and then I'm off on Fridays. So I didn't work last Friday. So I got off at 2 today. And because Tuesdays are generally the days that we tend to go into the office, my coworker was just like, "Oh, that's really cool. I really wish that I could get off at 2." And I'm just like, "Oh, do you? Do you really?" Because to quote Biden, here's the deal. I'm also only getting half a paycheck, and I am stressed, so I wouldn't necessarily want to be in my situation if I was you. So he goes, "Oh, have you been looking for other work?" And I'm like, "Hell fucking right I am. Like, why wouldn't I?" And it's funny because I remember when I initially was having the conversation with my managers when they wanted me to like cut my hours, when we had that conversation of, hey, things haven't necessarily been going right. So we kind of have to do some cutbacks and we can't really afford your salary anymore. So we're proposing this new concept of you working 20 hours instead of 40, which was fine. Like, it wasn't because I wasn't doing the work, right? Like whatever they actually did need, despite what I also just said about like being lazy or whatever, I get the work that needs to get done. Like I am actually a good employee, not to toot my own horn or talk my own shit. But I mean, I am a little discouraged in the fact that I can't seem to get anybody to like communicate with me and get the things like that I need them to do done. I mean, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my work environment, but it's like everybody comes to me and they want my shit done immediately. But when I need stuff from them, I can't seem to get anybody to answer me from anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks. And yeah, that's a fact. I remember on a project that I was working on, my managers and I were working, and I needed them to verify something, and I didn't hear back from one of them until like 3 weeks later. So yeah, I'm sorry if you don't feel like I'm working that hard, but hey, like I'm only doing with what I can. And if I'm not getting anything back, then yeah, I'm not working because my work also relies on you. Like this is a domino effect here. If you don't get back to me, nothing gets done. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it's funny because, so going back, when I was having this conversation with my employers about the time change, they asked me like what the deal was if I was going to be looking for other work. But I didn't want to just get fired right then and there and say, oh yeah, no, I don't want to work here anymore. Fuck this. I'd rather try and find something that's 40 hours. So I had to play nice and say no, because at the end of the day, I still needed some sort of income, right? Like I wasn't just going to say, hey, yeah, put in my 2 weeks right now. Like, I don't know when the hell I'm going to get another job. It could be like 2 weeks from now. It could be like 2 months from now. It could be 2 years from now. Like, I needed some sort of income. So yeah, I wasn't just gonna say, "Hey, fuck this," because I needed the work. Like I need a paycheck. So I mean, I don't think they're stupid. Like they definitely know I'm looking for other shit. And I know that this podcast episode hasn't really been that funny. I don't even know if you guys think that the other episodes are funny, to be completely honest. But I mean, I'm stressed. Like, this is what I kind of have going on in my life. And I understand that I am not the only person in this world where their job just decided to totally fuck them over. I mean, thank God I wasn't officially let go. I mentioned that in a regular podcast, or in an earlier podcast, sorry. But I mean, this really is not a fun feeling. But you know what's kind of wild? And I don't mean to totally make this like a religious podcast or anything like that, but I do have my faith. I mean, I literally wear like my religion or my faith on my sleeve. I have religious tattoos going down my right arm here. And it is wild because I maybe had the sense that something like this might have happened or could have happened like while I was working with this company. It wasn't the sense that I didn't think the company was secure or anything like that, but it was more of the sense of like my company outsourced a lot of my position, and it wasn't because of anything I did. It was just because like an outsourced or a third party source had more tools that we could utilize. So I basically just became like more of a project manager than I did like an SEO manager, just due to the tools that we didn't have. And it's funny because, like, as I mentioned before on podcasts, like, I go to church every week and I do pray. And it's funny because God doesn't necessarily, like, answer your prayers in the sense of wealth, but He does, I think, answer your prayers in the sense of, like, life direction. And it's funny because every week when I go to church, I always say, like, give me a sign, like, I need something to go right this week or something, like anything like that, right? I mentioned this on an earlier podcast where I wasn't sure if podcasting was necessarily a good thing for me to do, and I needed a sign, and I saw a cardinal out my window, so I took that as the sign of like God telling me that this might be the way for me to go here. Like I told this on a previous episode, but when I was living in Rhode Island, like I was really down. I started going to church and things started working out for me. And I mean, it's funny because I remember back in 2019 when I originally had the idea to start a podcast, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I initially wanted to do it with a friend. Like I thought me and a friend would be able to just kind of riff and just do whatever we like. My thought process was, oh, I have funny friends, so we're kind of like entertaining enough. So why don't we just treat the podcast as if it were a phone call? So I remember me and my friends sat down at my kitchen table and I put out the two microphones, I put out my recording software, and I said, let's go. And we both just ended up staring at each other blankly because we had no idea what we were going to say or how we were even going to start it. That episode, or that like time that we tried to do a podcast, it went nowhere. And it's nothing on my friend. It's just the fact that we had no fucking clue what we were doing. And when I rejoined the idea of maybe trying to start a podcast because I don't necessarily know what I want to do in my life, And I've always kind of wanted to get more into the media aspects of things. And I've never done anything in my life to kind of get to that point. Like, I never took any internships for media or took a job for media. I always just took the more lazy route. So, I'm sitting here doing like one of my first podcasts, and I'm just like, God, is this the way that I should be going? Like, is this the direction that I need to take? And I remember that cardinal sitting outside my tree, and that was my sign. So, like, it's not necessarily the fact that God's going to just give you everything, but He's going to give you signs that you're on the right path. And I remember going to church and just being like, hey, like, as of recent, things aren't really going the way that they should in my life. Like, my job definitely hasn't been going the way in my life. Hell, right now is a clear sign that my job is not the way that it should be going right now. So, like, I pray and I'm just like, what should I be doing? Like, what can I do? And I've been applying to jobs, and all of a sudden this week, I've gotten 4 interviews scheduled. So don't tell me that there is no God and that God's not listening, because He is. Like, you just have to believe that He's there. Like, I've had so many things in my life that are not perfect, but somehow, some way or another, like, things just ended up working out for me. And it's part of the reason why I have tattoos of like religion on my arm. And it's because, like, not only am I showcasing that yes, this is my faith, and yeah, you can argue that having tattoos goes against having faith, but it's also like a proclamation of me believing in the faith, because just as much as like my faith is permanent, so are my tattoos. And I don't think my faith is going to be going anywhere. But it's reasons like this that for all of the bad stuff, there's also a lot of good in this world that happens. And I can actually appreciate some of what like somebody who's agnostic might believe, in the sense of maybe not necessarily knowing if there's a God because of all the bad. Because, I mean, yes, why would a child who's like only 7 years old or 3 years old end up getting leukemia? Like, there is a lot of bad shit that happens. And it's totally normal to have to want to question your faith, or like question if God is real, because why would God allow such bad things to happen, right? But that's a very normal thing. I mean, even somebody who believes might question what God allows. But there's a lot of things in this world that we don't understand. And yeah, you guys might make fun of me for not necessarily believing in astrology, but why should I believe in God? Well, I don't know. There's also this idea of like, how does something come from nothing? I mean, explain that to me. So even the idea of the Big Bang Theory, like, that is just a theory. So that theory is the fact that like an atom the size of like your fucking pinky nail or whatever exploded, and that's what created the universe. But my question is, how did that atom, if space was nothing before that atom exploded, then what even caused that little atom to get there in the first place? And then it's funny because like the first world, like some of the first words in the Bible is, and then God created light. And then scientists decide to come up with the idea of the Big Bang, which is just this huge explosion. So little things kind of coincide together here. And it's for these reasons why I gear towards more the fact of believing than not believing. Because once you die and you end up at those pearly gates, if you believe, you've got a like decent shot at getting in. If you don't believe and you're at those pearly gates and you're just having this like, oh shit moment, like a literal come to Jesus moment, you're kind of fucked. But I don't know. That's just my thoughts on the matter. If you guys have made it this far, I'd be shocked. This has been a pretty heavy podcast, just talking about like my own stresses, and now we're talking about religion and God. Wow. But let's plow ahead here. So I ended up not going to Boston this weekend, or this past weekend, just because the weather was going to be kind of shitty and I didn't feel like driving 4 hours in the rain. So I'm actually postponing my trip to next weekend, or this coming weekend. So because I thought I was going to be going to Boston, I didn't really have anything planned for the weekend. So I kind of sat around, and if you haven't noticed, I changed up the music to the podcast. And one of the main reasons I did, I mean, I never really liked the music to begin with. I actually just thought that the music it wasn't really my speed. Like, the genre of music that I tend to listen to is like more hard rock and heavy metal. So the music that I had was just something that I had come up with in college for a personal project that I was doing. And I never really liked it. So I'm like, you know what? Let's gear the music more towards like my own style, because this is my podcast. So it should be in my style, shouldn't it? So I took the pleasure of like changing it up. But part of the main reason I changed it up was because I had a friend who listened to the podcast and she goes, you know what? It's actually not that bad. I liked it, but you gotta change that elevator music that you're playing with it. So I was like, all right, let's change this bitch up. But I also used the free time that I had to watch the new Avatar the Last Airbender series on Netflix, and I have complaints. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm totally gonna butcher her name. I think her name is pronounced Gio Wendeo. She plays Katara, and oh my god, her acting is so fucking vanilla. Oh my god, like in the original series, Katara's a badass, but in this show, they just make her seem so whiny. Like even when she sounds excited about something, she's it just seems so incredibly forced. Like where's your emotion? Where's your passion? Like even when she's yelling out, it's like a whisper, like Aang, Aang. Like I hear her and my mind just immediately cuts to that episode of Family Guy where Stewie kills Lois and he trips and he's just like, Mommy, Mommy. Oh, it literally gives the same fucking vibes. Ugh. Like honestly though, I gotta be honest, like all of the acting in the show is like low-key subpar. Like, I know that the person who plays Aang, his name is Gordon Cormier, and Aang is the main character of the show. I know that he's only like 14, so I get it. He's a kid. And I'm not saying that I could do any better. But, I mean, they may as well have just made his character a fucking teenage girl. Because I don't know what it is with the makeup, but he literally looks like a girl. I mean, you can clearly see that he's wearing red lipstick, so someone in that fucking makeup department needs to get fired. But also, his eyebrows look way more on fleek than Katara's. I mean, they should have just made him a fucking female character. God knows he sounds like one. Like, why didn't they warn us that Avatar went trans? Like, if that's the vibe that they're trying to go with, it's fine. I don't really give a shit. But, like, just a warning would have been nice. But honestly, Sokka and Zuko are really the only decently casted characters, but they kind of did Sokka's character really wrong. Like, I feel like his character is a little too serious in a way. Like, if he has told a joke, I've clearly missed it because I've yet to hear a single funny thing come out of his mouth. But the scene with Yue was absolutely terrible. First of all, Sokka did nothing to stop her from sacrificing herself and didn't say a fucking word. He just watched it happen. He just watched her go into the spirit pool. She literally just got into the water and that was it. I mean, even in the original version, considering that Sokka and Yue had a relationship for about like 30 seconds, Sokka actually tried to get her to not do what she was going to do because he was like, quote unquote, in love with her. So they just kind of totally did away with that and they kind of made Sokka look like a bitch. Like, Sokka just allowed it to happen. Like, he didn't really say, no, I don't want you to, like, nothing happened. And then he goes up to her dad at the end. He's just like, yeah, I just allowed it to happen. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like, you literally could not have done any less than what you tried to do, which was nothing to begin with. So, and also in that same episode, holy shit, watching Aang attack the Fire Lordships felt slower than my friggin' workday. Like, I actually had to fast forward through it. I was just like, oh my god, can you just hurry the fuck up? Like, I understand that the special effects are absolutely incredible. I mean, all the CGI, all of the fight scenes, they all look really good. So if all you were trying to do was just capture how good the CGI was, you did well, because the actual scene itself was horrible. I was so fucking bored watching that. As a quick synopsis, it was 5 minutes, maybe even like 8 minutes of roaring and just like arms waving. That was pretty much it. Nobody missed anything there. And you know, like even the little things kind of pissed me off about the show. I mean, I said this about the introduction, but they couldn't even get the little things right. Like even the way that Momo was discovered. And if you haven't watched the show, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Momo's a lemur that they discovered and he becomes one of Aang's pets. But Momo is also a symbol of hope because all of Aang's people were wiped out, so it was a genocide. And Momo was the last thing discovered that was found in his world. So there was this symbol of hope that like Aang had something to hold on to from his past life. But the way that he was discovered, and one of the running jokes is that like one of the characters, Sokka, is always hungry. So when they initially found Momo, Sokka wanted to hunt him because he was hungry and he wanted food. But instead, Aang was like, no, I want to keep him as a pet. But in this new adaptation, Momo just like is found in one of their bags because he got stuck in it like he's some sort of fucking house cat. So it was just like, here's a random cute character. Let's have him just come along for the ride like he's fucking Kevin from Up. And then, oh my god, the fact that they almost had him killed? That was never in the original series. I almost fucking rage quit right then and there. And plus, the show just skips around more than a gay dude at a pride parade. The original show was 3 seasons, 20 episodes each season. So you'd think that Netflix would just mirror that, and since each episode is an hour, then Netflix would just squeeze in 2 episodes into a 10 episode season. But no, Netflix is dumb and they have an 8 episode season. So they skip all of the side stuff and all they keep is like the main story plots, which, yeah, that would make sense. But everything just honestly seems totally lost and the story doesn't seem fully cohesive. Like even the episode that we're first introduced to Boomy, like comparing it from the original series, Aang didn't know who Boomy was from the start. Plus also the way that Aang was captured was totally incorrect. That episode did not coincide with the fucking Tunnel of Lovers episode. We'll touch on that like in a little bit. So when Aang discovers who Boomy is, in the original series, Boomy has Aang complete 3 tasks in order to save Sokka and Katara, right? But we just totally neglect all 3 of those tasks, and those tasks were vitally important to knowing what Aang needed to know in order to become an avatar. The only test that they actually showed from the original series was when Boomy challenged Aang to a fight. And in general, Boomy's fucking character wanted me to throw my phone across the room. Like, I understand that Netflix tried to showcase the fact that this show was originally a Nickelodeon cartoon with how they portrayed Boomy's antics, but the way that they portrayed Boomy was just cringeworthy. So anyways, in that same episode when they showcased the Tunnel of Lovers, which was not in the right place of the storyline, considering the fact that Sokka and Katara didn't travel through the tunnels alone to save Aang from Boomy, and that the original was actually like the first real scene to showcase a physical relationship between Aang and Katara. Like, first of all, that's completely missing from the whole storyline to begin with, is Aang and Katara's relationship, which honestly, I don't really mind because that's like one of the flaws I actually have from the original series. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but I thought that Katara should have gotten with Zuko at the end of it. Just because I also figure like having 2 of the main characters get together is just really cliche. And Aang was also really young. I mean, maybe not really young, but he was definitely like early teens. Katara maybe mid-teens. And so was Zuko. So I think Zuko was more in that like right age range for Katara. Like it just made a little bit more sense to me. So if this rendition can actually do that, I will actually be happy. But considering it is the Tunnel of Lovers, when it was just Sokka and Katara going in, I was like, what the fuck kind of country ass shit is Netflix trying to portray here? And if you don't know, Sokka and Katara are siblings, so that should explain that. And now let's get to the episode with Ko, which is also blatantly wrong. I didn't think humans were able to talk to spirits, so why was Sokka able to talk to a spirit fox? And then why did they also randomly make the fox that Sokka was talking to Yue? Like that was just so randomly out of pocket, contributed nothing to the plot. Like, I wasn't sitting like, oh shit, I was sitting there like, the fuck is this shit? On top of it, that same episode in the original series, Aang was never captured by June. And the way that he was captured was also dumb because they didn't showcase Roku fighting off his own people for Aang in the Avatar state to escape. And then they figured that this would be the correct time to showcase Zuko as the blue spirit to help Aang escape. And if you haven't seen the show, Zuko's actually trying to capture Aang, so that's why that's kind of important. But I don't know, it just seems like they were trying to fit in so much with so little time. But also, I don't understand why all the characters are trying to force this narrative that Aang has to do everything on his own and that he can't utilize any help. Like, what kind of message is Netflix trying to portray? Like, the original series was actually showcasing how Aang's friends helped him and how Aang was able to utilize his friends as resources. But in this version, it's so fucking negative. Like, oh, you only have yourself to rely on. Like, why is the show just going so hard on self-independence? Is that because that's just where they think society has gone nowadays? And that's like what kids need to hear? It just doesn't really make sense to me. So we have this ass cheeks version of an otherwise great original series, and this new rendition is trying so hard to encapsulate the idea that you have to do things and be independent. Meanwhile, they're totally neglecting some of the other themes that made the show great, and one of those themes that has yet to be shown in this new series is this idea of feminism. Like, in the original series, Sokka would actually say some stupidly sexist bullshit, and Katara would call him out on it. Like, for example, the first introduction that we had to Sokka and Katara in the original series, like in the first episode, Sokka made a sexist comment about women belonging at home or something, and Katara got mad. Like, it really wasn't until Sokka met Suki, where Suki, as a female warrior, kind of showed, hey, women can be tough. Women can have all of these, like, attributes that you only aspire to have. So it really wasn't until he met her where the sexism in his character kind of faded out a little bit. But in this new adaptation, the Sokka and Katara bickering, it doesn't have anything to do with like gender roles or anything like that. It just seems like more of a sibling rivalry. Like it's no different than an argument that I would have with one of my sisters. I mean, the only time in this new adaptation of the series that there was any sort of like pro-feminism undertones here was when Katara challenged Paku to a fight just like she had in the original series. But even this was kind of changed. And even then, in this new adaptation, Katara just doesn't showcase the same rage as the original series where she tries to Beastie Boys it and fight for her right to party. Nah, she just fucking whines. She's just like, I want to fight. I've already fought more Fire Nation army people than you have. And it's like, that's your fucking big selling point? Like, honestly, you sounded no different to me than one of those kids that I have to deal with at the bar. Like, it literally gave off the same vibes to me as like, oh, I want to go in there because my friend is in there. Like, alright, I don't give a fuck, go home. At this rate, I'm just going to tell the bartenders to swap the beer bottles out for milk bottles because you're all acting like a bunch of fucking babies. Like, in the original series, the reason why Katara challenged Paku to fight was to showcase her worth not only as a waterbender, but to showcase that women are capable and strong. So that also gave this underlying message of women standing up for themselves as a whole, and that it wasn't just a matter of women being able to fight in general. Like last time I checked, women have been a major part of our armed forces for a while now. So you really aren't showcasing any groundbreaking ideologies here. Like we all know women can fight nowadays. Like Ronda Rousey could easily kick my fucking ass. But you know, I'd enjoy the fact that she's got her legs wrapped around me at least. But I mean, I don't know. Considering the fact that feminism is such a big part of today's society, you would think that they would actually showcase that a little bit more in this new rendition. So yeah, so for all of these reasons, the poor acting quality, the fact that the show just seems kind of out of place, out of order, and a little confusing, and then the fact that they don't really showcase some of the original themes, I feel like this show is a real letdown. Like, the only reason that this version is more well received is because the M. Night Shyamalan version was so bad that nothing could get much lower unless it's my self-esteem. But after watching this absolute piss stain of a show, I think I found out where Hunter Biden's cocaine ended up, and it was in the writing room for whoever was writing this shit. I mean, don't bother wasting 8 hours of your life like I did. I mean, why didn't they just change it to be a more adult version if they were going to do anything? Like, everyone who would have been excited for this show would be in their mid to late 20s. So, like, why didn't they just have a modern take on it and make the jokes a little bit more mature to keep up with their audience? I mean, none of us would have cared if Aang was like 17 and Sokka and Katara were in their 20s. I mean, have Sokka tell a dirtier joke here or there. Ooh, but Sokka said the word ass. Ah, so raunchy. My sister actually had a good idea, though. Like, if you were going to do this, why didn't they give us something totally new? Like, they made Avatar the Last Airbender as a TV show, then they also made Legend of Korra. So why didn't you actually give us a live-action version to go more of what happened in between the two shows? I know for a fact that this was actually a comic book series, so why didn't they repurpose the content that we haven't seen yet, instead of trying to, like, repurpose something that was already perfect? So you know what, Hollywood? Go fuck yourselves. Like, do better. Honestly. For everyone. Stop just repurposing shit in general. We're all tired of it. Like, are you guys really down that bad where you guys can't come up with any new ideas? I mean, wasn't that what the whole writer's strike was about? Was for the fact, like, is that why you guys just wanted to use, like, AI tools to help you come up with some new scripts? Because no one in your fucking writing rooms can actually come up with something original? Like, where's the documentary on this? That's what I would love to know. But alright guys, I'll leave you on that note. And man, I felt like this was a wild episode. We talked about why I had to re-upload this episode, we touched on what's going on with my job and what's going on there, and we also gave a little shout out to God. But if you guys want to reach out, you know where to find me at lnbemedia@gmail.com. Give me that 5-star rating just to kind of help things going along, and maybe even write me up a review. Alright guys, that's it for me. I'll catch you next week.